when you open the door for somebody else.
Okay, welcome to podcast 6, our 6th episode of the Vaccine Conversation with Melissa and Dr. Bob.
Hey, everybody. And
I'm Dr. Bob.
Yeah, I'm Melissa. Hey, everybody. We probably shouldn't number them because what if we change the order?
We're not.
So this might not be number 6.
It's going to be number 6.
Okay,
we are committed. We're committed now, so this is number 6.
Okay, well, there's going to be a 5.5 that I think is way more interesting
Really?
than this. Yeah, that I'm going to insert. Okay, but anyway, go ahead.
A 5.5. Oh, goodness. Right. Okay, so this podcast is about the media, measles, and misinformation. And this has to do with what's going on right now with the European measles outbreak and the types of articles that we're seeing about this and how the articles are basically creating that same level of fear and the push for further vaccination again. So this is not happening in the US, but this is happening in Europe. And so there was this article that came out last week titled, "Measles Outbreak Raging in Europe Could Be Brought to U.S. Doctors Warn." We don't know what doctors, but many of them doctors warn about this. And the first quote they have is, "People are dying from measles." This was unbelievable 5 or 10 years ago. Unbelievable. Yeah. Even though this was all still happening just like usual. So the outbreak right now, we've got about 41,000 cases in Europe, and there have been 40 deaths. Okay, this is according to the World Health Organization. And just to put that in perspective of percentages, this is 0.09%. Okay, so this is not even. This is less than 1/100th of a percent.
Right.
So that means that 40 deaths out of the 41 cases has the same fatality rate for measles that existed before the vaccine was introduced.
Right.
So when we look back at before the vaccine, and we have a nice little infographic on that on immunityeducationgroup.org, right, which is our nonprofit, the infographic for that shows that out of the 500,000 annual cases, there were between 400 and 500 deaths, which came out to the same fatality rate that we have now post-vaccine. And so what you hear a lot about is, what would happen if enough people stopped vaccinating? So let's say for measles, what would happen? Well, what would happen is exactly what we saw before the vaccine was introduced, but probably smaller numbers because, things have changed in a lot, healthcare and things have changed in the last 80s, 70 years.
Right. Yeah, I think people try to give the impression that measles is somehow more dangerous now than it was 50 years ago, back when everyone was catching it. And it's really not. There's really no difference in the germ and how severe or not severe it is. It's really the same disease. And honestly, I think unfamiliarity breeds fear. And because none of us are familiar with measles anymore in the United States, because we don't have it here anymore.
But it's more than that,
people are worried about it. People fear it.
It's because
they don't
the
know
media portrays fear.
Right,
because even if I didn't know this disease, but the media said, "Oh, it's measles season again," I wouldn't have the fear of it even if I didn't know about it.
Okay, that's fair.
It's in every article. Look at the title of this. This could be brought, this outbreak is raging, and this could be brought to the U.S. People are dying from this. The very beginning of this article is, oh my God, this is very serious. So even if you don't read the rest of it, even if you don't know anything else about how the measles, we'll talk about this, actually cycles and is there are always cases of measles, depending on the year. Yeah, if you didn't even know that, though, you'd be afraid.
I know, and they often come out with articles like this because they don't have any U.S. outbreaks to build the fear on. Over the last 20 years, we have not had any huge U.S. outbreaks. They've always been minor, small, well-controlled outbreaks that are very well contained and very quickly contained. Measles has not spread through the U.S. in any big way in over 20 years. So because they I guess Americans are getting complacent and the media don't have an example of something in the U.S. to talk about, they have to go to Europe and start pulling stories from other parts of the world so they can keep the fear going.
Well, they tie it into the U.S. by saying this is what they said. This may offer a window on how quickly things can go awry when parents choose not to vaccinate their children, doctors caution. And they said this could be brought to the U.S. So because most people wouldn't really notice this article if it was just measles in Europe, they're putting in the title, this could actually come to you here in the U.S. So don't get comfortable because, again, that fear has to be close to home. And because it's not close to home, because we don't have those outbreaks there. And Europe, of course, is covering a huge portion of geography. And we're talking about millions of people that live there. 40,000 it sounds significant, and I'd have to look at what numbers usually are on a typical year in Europe. But more than anything, I'm looking at the fatality numbers. Like you always say, any death, of course, is tragic. But the point is that healthy people are not dying from measles, and nor would they if they contracted it, because 99.9% of the population before the vaccine was introduced was also not dying from the measles. And now that the vaccine has been introduced, when an outbreak like this happens, still 99.91% of the population is not dying from this. I mean, that's a significant number to pay attention to. 40,000 seems big. It seems like a huge number. That's what you would notice. But 99.9%, I think, is probably the one that's more important. Yeah,
but I want to clarify, though, some of these statistics. We use the fatality rate of measles of 1 in 1,000. 1 in 1,000
Who's we?
Cases. Well, the U.S. government, the CDC, this article. They say 1 in 1,000 cases of measles are fatal. And I'm actually going to say that's actually not true. There's a word missing. It's 1 in 1,000 reported cases of measles are fatal, meaning out of all the cases that are severe enough and you feel sick enough to seek medical care, you go to the doctor's office, you go to the hospital, your case gets reported in the database. Out of every 1,000 of those, we suffer 1 fatality.
Out of the ones that were serious enough to even seek medical,
We know from research that only 10% of cases are severe enough to seek medical care. Only 10% seek medical care. So only 10% of the cases are being counted.
And out of those 10%, only 1 out of 1,000 of that 10% is...
Right, so in reality, you have to times all these numbers by 10. So in reality, the fatality rate out of all cases of measles is 1 in 10,000. Not 1 in 1,000. It's 1 in 10,000.
And aren't there rates too also talking about global numbers versus what's happening?
Right. Well, these numbers are based in Europe, first world countries in Europe and the United States.
For 1 in 1,000.
Right. Yeah. 1 in 1,000 reported, but 1 in 10,000 in reality. Back when everyone used to catch measles, you even talked about it. We used to have, again, very tragically, every death from these diseases is very sad and tragic. 400 kids in the United States used to die every year of measles. Back when each one of the 4 million kids that were being born each year used to catch measles. It used to go around in outbreaks every 2 or 3 years. There'd be a big outbreak. Lots of kids would catch it. Again, the fatality rate was 1 in 10,000.
And this is in the 50s and the 60s,
yeah,
early
50s
60s.
and 60s, 40s, 30s. So the fatality rate, I mean, again, not to say that these deaths are not tragic, but the fatality rate for each individual living in a wealthy, well-nourished country like the United States and Europe, all the countries of Europe, the fatality risk is very, very, very low. It's extremely low.
And in the U.S., we know there has not been a reported death from measles in 13 years.
Right, and children, the last child that died of measles was in 2003. That's because in a well-nourished country, measles just isn't fatal. You go to Africa, it's terrible. Kids are dying. Lots of kids are dying.
And there's
in Africa.
many theories about vitamin A deficiencies.
Right,
and
it's
whatnot
vitamin A deficient. They're malnourished. Those are the kids that pass away. So again, I so wish that the media would write these stories with the real numbers,
right?
Instead of doctoring the numbers to put the worst case scenario.
Well, this is what people call cherry picking data, right? Like essentially they're picking numbers that they know will advance the agenda or whatever the narrative they're trying to create. And we talked about this in our Media Soundbite podcast episode, is that a lot of this stuff is skewed. So as this article continues, it says, and this is funny, this was like all big, a large quote. Many forget that measles isn't just a childhood disease. And what's so funny about that is that's literally the opposite of what you always say. And what many doctors and many physicians and health practitioners say, measles is a childhood disease. But people say many forget this isn't just a childhood disease, but it is. And they're saying that on purpose because they don't want people to be able to brush this off. This needs to be way more serious. And so they're leaning into the listeners and the readers right away by saying this is not just some benign, disease here. We're talking about something very serious.
Yeah. You ask very older doctors, you ask older members of society, they'll all just say, yeah, we all caught measles back then, just like everyone used to catch chickenpox, and that's how we viewed it. So what has changed? I mean, nothing's changed except
measles hasn't changed.
Right, measles hasn't changed.
The fatality rate hasn't changed.
Right.
Even with before and after the vaccine. I noticed. So they talk about a pregnant woman in this story who lives in Italy and how she was terrified to find out that she had contracted measles as part of this outbreak. And what they make sure to say is she talks about her child. They say her baby that she had was not infected, but they say right at the end of it, now she got through it okay, and her baby is fully vaccinated. Just to confirm that they want to let you know the action step as a result of this article is to scare you into understanding this is so serious. She was at major risk. Luckily, she came out okay, and she's smart enough as a parent to fully vaccinate her child to make sure this could possibly never happen to her child. But of course, what we know, they said she was never vaccinated as a child, but I don't know if that means she did or did not get exposure to it herself as a child. But what we do know, and we'll talk about, is there is waning immunity for most vaccines, if not all of them. And so even if she was vaccinated as a child, the pregnant woman, as an adult, she might have lost her immunity and could have still caught measles in this particular outbreak. But they're trying to make it seem like it was because she didn't get the vaccine. She didn't get it, and that's why she put herself in this situation, and she put her baby at risk. Turns out she's fine, the baby's fine, but that's not what they want you to pay attention to.
Right.
They want you to pay attention to the 40,000 cases, and this raging outbreak is coming to U.S. next.
Right, and I like to point out, I guess, some ironies in when you look at a society that uses measles vaccination compared to that society before they used measles vaccination, and how that ties into the pregnant women and babies and adults and elderly, is that when you look at in the old days when everyone caught measles, they all caught it when they were a child, like 2, 3, 4, 10 years old. They all became immune for life. All these women grew up to be immune adults. So then when they're pregnant, they're immune.
Right.
So they cannot catch the disease when they're pregnant.
Yeah.
Because that's when the disease can be dangerous to an unborn baby.
Uh-huh.
This mom who has natural lifelong immunity gives birth to a baby who then has immunity. The baby's born immune. The baby cannot catch measles because he or she is born immune for about the first 9 months of life. Because that's also when measles can be very severe.
Right.
Measles can be very severe if you catch it as a baby. Okay, so pregnant mom's protected with natural immunity. Baby's born protected. Baby's immunity wears off. The child catches measles. And the cycle continues. Tragically, about 1 out of every 10,000 of those babies will pass away. But the rest of the herd is completely protected. The herd that needs protection the most with natural herd immunity model is protected. Who in the herd needs the most protection from measles? Pregnant moms and babies and older people and adults. Because measles can be more severe if you catch it as an adult.
Right. And if there is waning immunity, if that is something that we will go on to discuss, then that means all adults are at risk of catching it again.
Right. But then you have to look at the vaccine model. Totally switches the natural immunity model around. The kids do not catch the disease because they get the vaccine.
Right.
Their vaccine lasts 10, 15 years, maybe 20 years.
Or lower.
Or lower, right. Okay, so we're not having measles in the U.S. anymore. No one's dying from it. but everyone grows up without immunity. You are now an adult
But they think
with
they
no
have it.
measles immunity. They think they have immunity, but they don't.
Right.
And in fact, the Disneyland outbreak we had in California, half of those cases were adults.
Yeah, I just looked at those cases
who
today.
had
actually.
vaccines when they were kids. Now they're adults, they don't have immunity.
One of them had 3 doses.
Wow. So all these adults lose their immunity. The pregnant moms, the kids that have the vaccine, they grow up. Now they're pregnant, but they don't have their vaccine immunity because it's worn off. So now you have an entire society of 4 million pregnant women every year with no measles immunity because their vaccine is worn off. So we're actually creating a susceptible herd. That's when these women and their unborn babies can be damaged by measles. Now they're giving birth to babies that have no measles immunity. So then, boom, that's another part of the herd that is completely susceptible to measles. And then we vaccinate them to start the process over again. So, I mean, it's interesting dynamic. And I'm not saying which model is better or worse. I'm not saying that for society to choose the vaccination model of measles is better, or to let us go with the natural herd immunity model is better. I'm saying it's a choice, and there's trade-offs one way or the other, and that really kind of fits into the fact that when they put these pregnant women on display and these babies on display, saying they're the ones that are getting harmed, we created that situation by opting in for the vaccination model. And I just find that kind of ironic.
And we're going to talk about artificial immunity.
Right. We'll have a whole episode on that.
Yeah, natural immunity.
I'll walk you through, as Melissa takes a nap, I'll walk you through each disease and that natural immunity versus the vaccine-induced immunity model and how it applies to each of these diseases. Because I kind of find it kind of interesting.
I can't wait.
I know you can. I know. I see the excitement already. Anyway, go ahead.
But just like we talked about with media sound bites, you definitely see the use of fear. And one of the things they say is they don't realize their child is at risk for measles, encephalitis, and permanent brain damage. And, just to me, that was ironic because, of course, what we've seen and what we know is that people experience encephalitis and permanent brain damage as a result of vaccines, not necessarily MMR, but the combination of vaccines that they are receiving, or a particular one like DTaP or something like that. These are the exact same things that people are afraid of with the vaccines that you're not allowed to talk about because vaccines are safe and effective, but they are going to highlight right away the risk that you have of encephalitis and permanent brain damage with this measles that's not even in the United States, by the way. This is in Europe. They just want you to theorize how this could get to you. And if it gets to you, this is what's going to happen. It's definitely manipulated information.
Right. And if I could touch on that just for a second, it's interesting. We know in the CDC vaccine information sheet on measles, it actually says right there, you can have permanent brain damage. You can go into a coma. You can even die from the measles vaccine. There are these risks of what they say here: encephalitis, permanent brain damage. There's
and
risks
measles.
from,
some people don't.
Some people get live measles from the vaccine.
Vaccine.
There's risk from the disease, and those same risks exist from the vaccine. Now think of this though. If you're vaccinating every single person in America for measles, you're asking every single one of them to risk that vaccine side effect.
Right.
Because we don't have measles in America anymore, except these very tiny outbreaks, the disease risk of these complications is very close to zero. So someone could almost argue statistically. In fact, it'd be interesting to know in the U.S. how many cases of measles vaccine-induced encephalitis and encephalopathy and brain damage and death do we have compared to the number of those that are induced by disease.
Well, here's my whole argument with that. We'll never know. We'll never know, because when a child does get encephalitis after a vaccine and is in the hospital, it is not associated or connected. So that's not going to be...
They don't acknowledge the vaccine can do that.
That's not going to be reported as such, but it will be reported if for some reason you got encephalitis after catching measles. That would be reported, and that would be in 100 news articles and on every news station.
Right.
But there's not going to be the connection made to even show. This is why a lot of times I'll get parents say, can you tell me what the relative risk essentially of getting measles would be versus getting the vaccine? I'm like, there's no way for us to tell you what the vaccine the risk of the vaccine because nobody's acknowledging it. So it's outside of your VAERS, which we'll talk about in a separate episode. Outside of that, we don't have statistics that get to show us that because nobody is writing them down. That's not to say they aren't happening. They are not being recorded because they're not being acknowledged as even existing. And so we are never able to have this conversation of data. This is what the MMR vaccine or the DTaP vaccine or any of the other live virus vaccines, let's say, I know DTaP's not, but this is what these cause, and this is what the disease can cause, and this is how many cases, and this is how many we can never have that side-to-side comparison, because when you suffer one of the things that MMR package insert, or the VIS form says, when you suffer one of those things and you go into the hospital, doesn't matter that you had just had your vaccine. It's not going to be part of the conversation. Right. So you will be listed as a child who has encephalitis. And I just was looking at the mortality statistics, and you've got 70 kids dying from a hernia every year, which is a lot higher than this perceived risk of something that's not happening. That the fear is based. I mean, it's just as it comes down to numbers, these numbers just do not add up to the level of danger that they're saying, and not just danger, because outside of what they're telling you, they're also telling you to go do something about it. And to go do something about it means go get vaccinated. Like, if you are part of that small group that is not, you need to do it because of this perceived danger. The danger that is not real and that is not there. And again, we don't have any idea what risk there is to the people that get the vaccines because it's never recorded. Right.
And another thing that pisses me off, a lot of things piss me off. Do I segue a lot
anger
that way?
You. Let's say anger you.
Yeah, something that I'm concerned about is the media say the only thing you can do about measles is to go out and get your measles vaccine, your MMR vaccine. And again, we're not here to say whether you should or shouldn't do that. The media says that's all you can do. They completely leave out the vitamin A treatment.
Right.
The World Health Organization and the American Academy of Pediatrics both describe a vitamin A high dose protocol where you take a very big dose of it one day and then the second day. It's 2 days of high dose vitamin A. You can buy drops or tablets. Taking high dose vitamin A reduces the complications of measles significantly, and it drastically reduces the mortality rate. It takes your risk of dying from measles down dramatically. Have you ever once heard a media outlet say, go get your MMR vaccine and talk to your doctor about taking extra vitamin A this week so you can reduce your complications of measles?
No, I mean, and obviously they should say that the vitamin A thing should come first even, because having a healthy immune system, which is something we're going to talk about also, is really your best defense against any infectious disease. Because the thing is, and this is something that I think people need to hear like over and over and over, just because you get your vaccine does not guarantee you protection. It is not that black and white. And that goes for the flu, that goes for anything, DTaP. Just because you went and got it doesn't mean that you are not susceptible, because the truth is there are things called primary non-responders. These are people who get the vaccine but do not produce that sufficient antibody response, which means you, in all of your glory, as you're walking around the community like, I've done my part, like you have no idea that your body actually may not defend itself against measles if it were contracted with it, and you could catch it and spread it to somebody else. And so it's not like it's guaranteed protection, that you just get the vaccine and that's it. The media says, the way that we can handle this is go get your vaccine. But the truth is like you're saying with vitamin A, and having a healthy immune system is what keeps us the strongest and less likely to be spreading it and putting people at risk. Healthy people have equal a healthy society. Just because you are vaccinated does not necessarily make you healthy, and that does not necessarily make you protected. People need to understand it's not guaranteed.
Right.
True or false?
I agree. I couldn't have said it better. That's why I didn't say it. That's why you said it. So talk about measles free.
Yeah, I was just going to say, so in this article, it says, even in England, where they were considered measles free a year ago, what does it mean to be measles free? And, people say, wasn't measles eradicated in the year 2000? So tell us a little about that.
That just blows my mind, because whenever you hear people talk about measles, they say, We eliminated measles in the United States in 2000. It was gone. We were done with it. And now it's back. And again, they're completely lying to you.
But it's back because why?
Because people are not vaccinated.
Right, because of the anti-vaxxers, quote unquote.
But it was never gone, people.
Yeah.
The year, in fact, I wonder, maybe I won't even tell you the answer, but if you Google search on the CDC website, all the cases of measles going back to the year 2000, where they say it was eliminated, guess how many cases happened in 2000? There was 86. 86 cases of measles in 2000. Ever since then, we've had either 40 or 120. We've had 200. We've had 50. We've never, we had 1 year with 600. We've never had a 0 year. Measles was never 100% eliminated ever in the United States. So it's never gone and it's not back. It's just always been. Yeah. And it's not on the rise either. There's no increase. There's little ups and downs.
It's cyclical.
Right? It's cyclical, but we just have these little up and downs. But the media, again, they can't tell you, oh, measles has always been the same. We never gotten rid of it. It's always about an average of 120 cases a year. Don't worry. They got to paint the fear. And the reason why they can say in quotes it was eliminated is, and we've said this before in other podcasts, but a disease is considered eliminated if it's no longer continuously circulating in our society. It has to be brought in from other countries.
Which it usually is every single year.
Right. So that's why measles is considered eliminated. Is in most days in the U.S., year-round, there's no measles. We don't have any measles. And then we get a little outbreak, so we have 3 weeks of a little outbreak in that area.
And an outbreak could be 8 individuals,
by
the way.
People.
It's not
20 people.
It's not 1,000 every time. Like I mean, you don't see 40,000 like in Europe. It's not like you're seeing those numbers.
And I guess I want to make the point that we will not have a large outbreak of measles in the United States. We can't. Our public health department is very efficient in containing measles. Can you hear my tummy on camera? There it is again. We're not going to have a large outbreak because measles comes in from another country with one person on vacation. They don't know they have measles. They infect 5 people. Those 5 people show up at the doctor's office, and then the alarm sounds. Mm-hmm. So those 5 people, they might have infect another 10 people. But by then, we know measles is in our city,
and
our county.
They know where it is.
They know where it is.
They list the locations. I've seen them.
Everyone hangs out at home for a few weeks, and then it dies off. It's not a disease that stays hidden anywhere and spreads and spreads and spreads. It doesn't do that. So we're not at danger of a large outbreak.
Right.
We're at danger of small outbreaks, and we will continue to have them bit by bit.
But small outbreaks aren't necessarily a danger.
Right.
So you might be at danger of a small outbreak, but it's not necessarily a danger. These, like you said, tend to be self-contained.
Right. And when we have these outbreaks of 15 people or 10 people in a county, again, the fatality rate for those people is 1 in 10,000. We will probably have a measles fatality here in the United States in the years to come. We probably will. Statistically, we likely will. But again, I think this is all about information and understanding what the media is doing and how to, track down your own accurate information so you can make educated decisions for yourself.
Well, I have to quote this guy, too, a doctor who is quoted in the media, obviously, for pro-mandates. They tend to go to the same handful of people whenever you see these articles, and we'll talk about that, too. But he says the problem is these anti-vaccine groups have made very strategic use of the internet and social media. And I just have to laugh because if anybody in our movement for informed consent has seen what goes on in social media and on the internet, they would beg to differ. It is not organized. It is not, nobody's making strategic use of anything. It's not even effective. It is what it is. But anyway, the point is there is not some huge campaign that is trying to, change the minds of people. And he goes on to say that people are making money off of these phony treatments. And that's why people are afraid of getting vaccines. And this is my favorite quote. He says, they like to use garbage terms like medical freedom or medical choice.
Medical choice? That's crazy.
That's so much garbage in there. I mean, medical freedom. Who would like to have freedom over medical decisions for their families and their own bodies? Isn't that such garbage to even think of medical choice? And then the part that is very manipulative is he comes around playing the victim. He says, there is no public relations campaign to explain why vaccines are so important.
What rock is he living under?
Well, and obviously he's part of the machine, which is so funny. The machine, the media sound bites that we talked about, it is exactly a public relations campaign. That's exactly what it is. Why else would he mention public relations? That's kind of like a Freudian slip, in my opinion. But he says, it's left to a handful of academics who are willing, like him, to tell his personal stories. And he said, and we're clearly outgunned. They're outgunned because, the media is obviously on the informed consent side because we get all the coverage, right? I mean, to be outgunned, they have media access 24/7. Instantly, anything that pushes this narrative is going to have the media behind it. So he's playing this poor, I'm just a guy who wants to help some people. I just want to make sure that you guys know vaccines are safe and effective and they're so important. Okay, I hope you believe me, but don't listen to all of those humongous corporations that have all the millions of dollars behind our media funding to help push this anti-vaccine sentiment. It's just completely not true. It is a total David and Goliath the other way, completely. And anybody who's been a part of this knows we have nothing. All we are parents who are concerned with rights and with vaccine safety. We have nothing to use to our advantage. We are always at the disadvantage. We gain nothing from this. There is no financial profit to be fighting for informed consent. Let me tell you, there is no social gain to fight for this either. You are isolated. You are outcasted. You are demonized. You lose friends and family. Even if your child had a vaccine reaction, this is not something you get into because somehow it's going to gain you anything. You lose almost everything. But you know what? People have to stand up for what is right. And it comes down to the principle of it. And there are dedicated parents in helping to inform others that we're not getting the whole story. And that's what this is about. This is not... This guy playing the victim is such a joke because really the victims here are that vaccine injured children. They're the ones that are victims of the program they had no idea had risks and that nobody's telling you about. End rant. I mean, it just gets me so angry because, it's such a joke. I mean, I'm telling you, like, just my experience in being around this in the last 4 years is this is not where you want to be. It is not a fun place to be. However, ethically speaking, I feel like I have an obligation to at least look at the information and make the information from the CDC, from the Department of Public Health, make that information available to parents like it was not available to me. And I feel like it is wrong what they are doing. And you can see in an article like this, talking about the way that they are portraying this is completely different from what the reality is with measles. And the measles outbreak in Disneyland was what exactly was used to push 277 and legislation like that. My feeling is this is going to come back around again in the legislative season. Oh, look at this crazy outbreak in Europe. This could happen to us. We need to get stricter. But obviously, we're already at 95%. And it does say, it actually says in here, according to the World Health Organization, at least 95% of the population must have received, it says at least 2 doses. Doesn't that kind of feel like they're setting up for a 3rd dose to be on the schedule? But 2 doses of the vaccine to prevent outbreaks. So we're at 95% in the state. Like, what else do they need?
I know. But as we said in a previous episode, we actually even know that 95% number is not even needed.
Right. Oh, of course.
It was a mathematical model. They've never actually tested how many people we need vaccinated for measles in order to achieve their artificially induced vaccine immunity. I would say, it's probably the real number is probably much lower than that, but we're at and above that number in the United States. That's why it's not, we don't need to have this fear of large outbreaks. And I want to throw in, I mean, I love your rant because I mean, you're right on. And I feel like, even though we often feel like we're in the minority, we gain nothing financially from being in the pro-informed consent and the pro-medical freedom camp. Is just our passion. We love it. But the main thing where we are is because we're not anti-vaccine, we are so strongly anti-mandate. And I think that's what's growing. I think our camp used to be pretty small. I think everyone used to kind of get along. most people vaccinated, some people didn't. We didn't have disease outbreaks. There were no mandatory vaccination laws. Everyone was kind of happy to kind of hang out and be friends. Now that they're making mandatory vaccination laws and they're going to make them more and more strict, the anti-mandate crowd, I think, are coming out of the woodworks, and we're going to become a huge group. And I would like to hopefully see us get better organized, and there are leaders jumping up in this group. And I would say the number of pro-vaccine but anti-mandate people is probably very large. And I think that's what we're trying to get.
The middle, right?
Yeah, that's the middle majority. Is that way?
But that's just normal. You think to yourself, yes, I might vaccinate my children, but I do understand that vaccines have side effects for some children, and I don't think they should be mandated as a result. Plus, I believe this is a medical choice that you should make with your own doctor. It should be up to everybody's individual family. These are personal rights, etc. They don't want the government hopping in there and controlling all these types of things.
Right.
I agree with you. I think that portion of the population is the majority of America, in fact. But that is not what you are hearing on the media, because media is trying to make it seem like the rest of the country feels this way. And this is why it's so skewed.
I know. And the media's job is to get all the middle majority who are pro-vaccine but anti-mandate, the people you just described. If the media can get them to stop and think, oh no, what about our non-vaccinating neighbors? Oh no, what will happen if we don't have enough vaccines? We'll have these huge outbreaks. That's the media's job, to convince those people that they should be afraid of those who don't vaccinate. And
the relationship that they have with that person as a result.
Right.
Because, I mean, and which I've seen so much, and we'll talk about that in a separate thing, because that's a really important part of this debate, is the social dynamic that happens as a result of this, and how the media is playing into that. Because like you said, a decade ago, nobody knew who was vaccinated and for what infectious diseases they were vaccinated for and how many doses they had. Nobody knew about that. Nobody talked about that. And it was not like you couldn't play with my kid next door. Now, the way that the media has presented it, they've created a false sense of fear. And now you are afraid of your neighbor, afraid of your family member, afraid of your coworker. I see these stories all the time. I'm not allowed over at the house anymore because of this. And it's all this perceived fear that doesn't exist. And we'll talk about that in another episode.
All right. Well, that was awesome.
And we're also going to talk about measles again. We're going to actually go through each disease separately and talk about the specifics of the disease, specifics of the vaccine, and the back and forth on just a whole episode dedicated to measles, and then a whole episode dedicated to pertussis. And we'll go through
we'll eventually get there.
Yeah, we'll get there. So this was just kind of talking about more, because this is in the news right now, more the social perception of measles and how it's portrayed and the fear that's there and what the numbers really are. And hopefully we've given you some information on this that you didn't know, and it kind of puts us in perspective. And keep an eye out for these articles. When you read them, understand that they are written through a lens, and that is not the lens of objectivity. So as a reader, you might not know a lot about this. You might be totally new to this information, and you might be very skeptical that any information is necessarily being hidden or censored or whatever. But I just want people to understand, keep a watchful eye when you see an article. When you see the same type of things come up over and over again, you'll know that what we're saying is true, that there is media bias in the way that they present it to create a sense of fear, to polarize parents, and make a need for more legislation that pushes mandatory vaccines. Like, in a nutshell, that's what's happening. And whether we want to admit it or not, it's there. And so it's really important as a parent to be aware of that, so you know how to decipher through information. You can tell what is a fact and what may be somebody's version of a fact to create a personal belief about it.
Right. Awesome. All right, you guys. Well, we will see you next time. I guess we're going to be talking about flu coming up, and it's flu season. And
yes, but don't tell them a podcast number. Oh.
Well, yeah, I guess we have to do a flu episode. In fact, we're going to do 2 flu episodes. It's so exciting.
Yes.
2 flu, right?
2 flu. We're going to get on that next, because that's also in the news.
All right. Well, see you
Thanks
next
for listening.
time, guys.
And don't forget to rate and review the Vaccine Conversation.
Be the change.
The information in this podcast is for entertainment purposes only. It is not intended as medical advice. Always consult your healthcare professional for information on vaccines and infectious diseases.